unhoused individuals and homeless. My name's Kevin Charbrough. I'm on the council.
I'm Rick Efford Chase. I'm the mayor in Newport.
Travis Haynes, head of school at United Christian Academy.
I'm Tessa Hubbard. I'm the program manager at the Front Porch Mental Health Urgent Care.
Chris Mitchell, AHS Field Services Director.
Neely Bryant. I'm the case manager at North Country Hospital Emergency Department.
Tom, I think that brings us to you.
Hi, I'm Dawn Arenas. I'm the Adult Outpatient Program Manager at Northeast Kingdom Human Services.
Oh, more people.
Oh, good. Pull up a chair, Sam. Sam, we just did introductions, but it didn't take very long. Do you know everyone, or should we just go around again for you?
Have we met? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I'm Tessa. I'm the program manager at Northeast Kingdom Human Services Front Porch.
Nice to meet you. Yes. I'm Samantha. I was working at North Country Supervisory in Community Schools with families and kids experiencing homelessness. Recently that ended, but still here in the business.
Well, great to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And I wonder if we might just want to introduce people who are here from the community too. All right.
What do you say? Northeast Kingdom Front Porch.
So can you all introduce yourselves to the rest of the group?
Yeah, Crystal.
Hi, Crystal.
I'm Nikki.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Ann Shirello, and I have something I want to say tonight.
Okay.
I'm Pam Lads. I'm filming, and I just say this is being recorded on NEK-TV, so just so you all know that.
Great.
Here comes Alan.
Okay, you want to start us?
Last meeting, we were going through the proposed ordinance for the city of Newport, which would regulate encampments in public and sensitive areas. It would provide a framework for response from our police and their embedded workers. And the reason for that is so there would be consistency among the officers. They would have guidelines and they would know exactly what they need to do and what they can't do. So I believe we had gone over section 3.
Can I make a suggestion, Kevin?
Yes.
We've got at least Ann, who said that she'd like to make some kind of a statement tonight, and Pam would too, and there are other folks who have joined us for the first time. I wonder if we might just want to start by hearing from anyone who's cared enough to come tonight and hear what their concerns are before we kind of launch into our agenda again. Is that okay?
Sure. Ann?
Yeah, the focus and the priorities of this committee have troubled me from the beginning, and I have made comments as I've heard them, but I really am offended by the thought of the ordinance. I know some other cities may have the ordinance, but I think when you estimated how many people you had involved in the tent situation, it was only about 20 people right now, or 20 tents. This isn't, I would suggest, a huge problem, but if you want to deal with the unhoused, I think that you should set up a priority. And the people who come from organizations, I'm sure, were very interested in this, these meetings, it's my opinion, because they wanted some solutions for where to house people. Maybe some money, thoughts about how we should collect money to get people housed and fed And so I wanted to remind you, when I look at the ordinance, it is, in my mind, very harsh for people who are unhoused, and in the end, doesn't tell them where to go at all. And when you consider how cut back NECA will be, and all of the other organizations who could come in considerably and help. And if you need help, maybe one of the we people in the community could go with somebody to help out. I'm not saying we have the training to do that. But anyway, so I came to this alternative. But for the grace of God, we learned these things when we were children, and they still apply, I believe. Though, who knows in this world? But for the grace of God, there go I. And people in San Francisco experienced it maybe about 10 years ago. You know, they had jobs, and then all of a sudden they didn't have jobs, and they didn't have houses, and they were middle class, and they thought everything was all right because, you know, everything's always all right for the middle class and for the upper class. And then they were homeless. And San Francisco has it is true, a big problem with the homeless now. But for the grace of God, any day, our Social Security could be taken away, our Medicaid could be taken away and has been, supposedly soon. Our Medicare could be taken away. Things could happen with the bank. You got a bank account. He's talking about taking away the insurance that covers it, FDIC. So people have lost their jobs in Washington, D.C., and unless they have a big backup, they've got to pay off the mortgages on those big houses. And so it can happen to you. And then we learn, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. What do I want if I become homeless? And all that NECA can do is, when it comes down to it, give me a tent. And then they give me a tent, and I try to put it up somewhere, and somebody else comes along and says, oh no, you can't put it up there. You know, that's too close to something. And if you make the distances high enough, of like 5,000 feet, you can get all the people out of Newport because they can't put up a tent anywhere. And if you look at who you're really protecting here, you're not protecting the people that need it. The people that need the protection here are what we call the unhoused, the homeless.
Hey, what do you call yourselves?
Homeless.
There you go.
Yeah, and the other thing is, if you can't improve anything, leave well enough alone. I mean, people have been in tents, and yeah, maybe they've been under the highway or something for some protection from the rain, and they live there. And if you can't help them out and do something, you know, you want to give them a house, you want to give them an apartment, okay, then try, then see if they'll move on. You want to give them a tent, at least tell them where to put it. And because you're fearful that if you tell people, oh, you can put a tent here, oh, the droves will come and they will descend upon Newport. I mean, it is, your priorities are the priorities of who's ever putting this ordinance together are all wrong. And once we get into the ordinance mentality, we all want, well, we could change this a little bit. But is it necessary to have this ordinance?
No. Citizens.
And then we learn, I mean, it was Hippocratic oath that that doctors even take. First, do no harm. I mean, if you're going to go out there and do all of this, and you can't tell them where to move their tent, and you can't provide for them in the winter, leave them alone. Do no harm. Because the interactions that you will cause could get people arrested, and you're giving them the imprimatur to do all the things that are in that ordinance. And so I think you should get your priorities right. Your priorities are, there are people, if your priority is the people in tents, let's figure out, and let's make sure they can all have tents to begin with, and let's figure out how to help them where to put them. Do you need money for a tent site for them? Then ask the community. We can come up with the money. What do you need? Do you need me to come out with a social worker because there aren't enough anymore in NEK to go out by themselves? I'll go out, I'll volunteer, and there's more volunteers around. We're not going alone only because we haven't been properly trained, and I don't necessarily know how to speak to people in a way that they will hear me. You know, I can maybe sound too authoritarian sometimes or whatever, and I don't want to do that to people. But if somebody's got the training, I'll go with them. And whatever else you need. Do you need food? Then we'll figure it out. Because it's going to happen more. It's not going to be 20 anymore. That's probably true. And you don't need all this ordinance to make cops more authoritarian. Oh, no, it says so in the ordinance. You move. Where do I move to? You know, it's cruel. And to think that you're going to have all these services that are going to come in and they're going to be able to provide, their services are going to be cut. You know people have already lost their jobs. I mean, let's be fair. And the last thing is, you participate in this ordinance thing, and you know what's going to happen? Your recommendations, quote, are going to the council. 2 of the council members are sitting here right now. And they're going to say, this is what the committee decided. So, you know, you twerk the 500 yards down to, you know, 300 yards. They're going to say, you participated, these people participated in deciding what is going to the council, what that ordinance looks like. Don't participate in that ordinance. Tell them no. We need to, you want to do an ordinance, we'll do it after we take care of this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem, money, whatever you need. Don't do it this way. This just gives the power to the police to get in situations where in the end they're going to arrest people and take them to jail. That's basically what I have to say. Sorry.
I have a controversial suggestion. Let's talk to them directly and ask them.
I just want to make sure I understand that you've read through the ordinance.
Yes.
Okay. And I couldn't find a spot where you said arrest people and take them to jail. That's not in the ordinance.
No, but it does say,
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
There are
so,
trespassing orders. Yes, it is.
and you would rather that the police did not have this framework to work with?
I would rather they did not. I would rather they work on their conscience.
Okay. Some officers have good conscience. Some officers just show up to work and get paid.
Well, they should be fired.
I'm not disagreeing. Let me tell you an example of what happened in, I believe it was 1992. I was working with the state police. We would often encounter individuals who they're homeless or in the area without a ride. They were turned away from the port of entry. They didn't have a car. They had no place to go. This particular night, I was not working. There was a individual, could contact the family, because obviously he needed help. At that time, Newport had a bus service, I believe it was Greyhound out of Jimmy Quick's. Not saying it was a good thing, but the state would bring people to the bus stop and say, here's a way you can get to wherever you want to go. They did that with this individual. Couldn't contact any family and friends. Said, we'll bring you to the bus. They left him in Newport. The next day, he's floating face down in the lake, naked and dead. He obviously was going through mental health crisis. And the reason is, the state at that time did not have a framework to work within. Now this one treats everybody with equality, respect, and compassion. There is no arresting a person, and then the back of the ordinance, it lists the resources that they need, that they can contact. Something they don't have now, something without an ordinance, you're leaving to individual officers who may say, no, this person is intoxicated, they need to go overnight in a detox. That's what will lead to arrest. This provides a framework for responding officers, and I read through it, it's perfect. It's very compassionate. There's a fine, but it says, you know what, I'm going to waive the fine if you agree to work with some of our public outreach people. If all you want to do is sit there and camp and you know, risk public safety, okay, you're obviously compromising public safety, and something needs to be done.
I think a policy with the police chief, you have a police chief here, and he determines how his police officers should behave. And that can be an internal policy. It does not have to be an ordinance.
Okay?
Yep.
I was equally upset when I left the meeting last time. I looked at the state statutes. Why do we think we need an ordinance when the state certainly has an adequate framework? So what you're looking for here appears to be a cudgel, just for Newport. I know other cities have done it too. But that's still not solving the problem. And when I hear statements like the generosity of not holding somebody to paying their fine, how in reality do you think somebody who is homeless is going to be able to pay a fine that is totally meaningless in the real world? But then what that does is build them a track record, a quote criminal record, and you're right in another loop. That makes no sense, Karen. None.
I understand what you're saying. This task force, if we could solve the unhoused and homeless, we would. And last time you were given a suggestion, if you don't know how to do it, tell us.
Why don't I wave a magic wand? The bottom line is we don't have the solution, but we could be looking for it and not just looking for a cudgel to hand to the cops.
Absolutely.
And I have respect for some of our cops, not all of them, but some of them I do.
Right, and this will give them a framework.
They have a framework. They have it from the state if they ever chose to look at it. We shouldn't be spinning our wheels on that. We could be looking at other solutions.
We shouldn't be looking at public safety?
We can be looking at public safety, but the state already has a framework. Why are we reinventing the wheel?
What statute is that?
I couldn't give you the number, but run your fingers through Google. It will give you some examples. And the ACLU and other organizations have responses to the legislation that is in place. That we could be talking about how to hand that out to people who are being harassed.
Can you bring that statute or those
I'll find something for you, sure.
Certainly, if there was something in place, the towns that have ordinances such as this would have used the statute. Unfortunately, we don't have the answer on how to solve this problem.
So we're looking for a framework to move people on, and that's
We're looking at best practices to treat people fairly with compassion.
But it's not treating people with compassion.
So, some of the other folks who are here in the room, would you like to
Speak up.
Yeah, we got all these abandoned buildings around here. Why can't we put money in something like that for homeless people? We can stick in the tents so they can keep this kid home, but get kicked out of their house by cops, and if we don't move, we're going to be taken to the court and stuff like that. It's twice that. And it seems like everywhere 710 up, things get spot, I'm out of way, not in public and everything. And they say, oh, they're coming up to me, telling me if I don't move, I'm going to get cited to court. I can't afford nothing, I ain't working right now, I'm trying to find jobs and everything.
But I actually do have a job, and if I get a citation, I lose my LNA license. I don't have a place to go, so if I get citated, I cannot work, period.
I have no family, I have no help, my kids are up here, I can't be, you know what I mean? I gotta be where my kids are.
So I want to be clear about the intent, the council's intent when we set up this conversation in this task force. It was to look at how we look at long-term problems for folks who are housing insecure, and how do we help them figure out how to get into a place that feels like security. That's actually the first statement in the three things that that's why I titled it that, right? Because the first point of the group is to say we have a long-term problem. And to be fair, we spent the first two meetings focused almost entirely on those questions and not on the ordinance question. The second piece in it is a question around public encampments. And what I heard our chief of police, Travis, asking for was some guidance about how to handle a problem in which his officers basically feel as if they're doing exactly what you're describing, Ann, which is, you know, right now it feels like they've got no clear, rational policy for how to respond to someone who doesn't have a place to be, but who's in a public spot, and help them to move somewhere else. So the question about the ordinance, just to be clear, was not to be primarily first and foremost, how do we get them out of our community? It was how do we make sure that if we're responding to a complaint or a concern, we're moving people somewhere, somehow, into something else, and that we're doing it with as much compassion as possible. A week and a half ago, maybe it was 2 weeks ago now, I know of an incident where there was a visitor who was in town, down on the boardwalk near the State House, who was commenting to someone else, this is how I heard this story, about what a beautiful place this is, and out of nowhere, somebody who had apparently spent the night before on the boardwalk walked up and just, not hard, not aggressively, just popped the guy in the head and said, get the fuck out of here, right? So those things happen too, right? And the community needs to be safe it needs to feel safe for everyone. So I want to make sure that we don't create a situation in which we've so polarized ourselves that the only camps in which you can belong are, I stand for people to have a right to be somewhere with dignity, or I want to get people out of the community of Newport. I think, in fact, what we're looking for is there's a whole lot more room in the middle there that we're trying to sort through. So I do think that we are talking about both things at the same time. Community safety that is legitimate. If you feel unsafe walking in a public space because you've had some kind of an interaction that has led you to feel unsafe in that public space, this is your community, and that public space is yours as much as the next person's. Right? So somehow we're trying to wrestle with a place to get to the middle of, or I don't even know that the middle is the right language, to find a rational way of supporting people who are insecure for the moment, because as you suggest, I know plenty of people who were secure a few moments ago and aren't today, and they maybe will have a place again next week or 2 months or a year from now, right? So very few people choose to be without a home as a lifestyle. There are some. Adam keeps reminding me there are some, and I know that's true.
Right there. Raise your hand.
So I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, Adam, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't either. Okay? I think it's important that folks are here and that they speak for themselves. Okay.
But Rick, the example that you give is of a person who was seated probably, got up, and hit somebody in the head. The police, if that's reported, know how to deal with that. If he has a mental health problem, then so be it. That's part of his defense. But if he's making the situation unsafe by hitting somebody, there's an offense on the books. It's called simple assault. And if the complainant and the prosecutor wish to pursue it against this fellow, then that's the way to do it. It has nothing to do with where he slept. It is not an unhoused problem.
I hear your point.
We can definitely find the guy who did that and make him be somewhere else.
So just to be clear, I want to be careful not to point the finger at any one person, okay? And I'm not about trying to figure out who it was or what happened. All I'm trying to say is we want a community at the end of the day where everyone feels like they are safe and secure. That includes people who do not have a place to live at the moment, and it includes people who are visiting, and it includes people who live in the community and want to be able to go for a walk along the waterfront or down our main street. And it includes our businesses, right? Who need to feel as if you don't have to step over or around someone who might feel threatening to you in order to get into their place of business. All of those things are legitimate concerns. And so I want to be careful as we have this conversation to make sure that we're not polarizing it and saying that person's evil because of their concern. And in fact, that's happening all over the state right now. If you look in Brattleboro and Burlington, these conversations are very heated. We have a luxury, in my judgment, of not having a crisis. What we have is some people who don't have a place to go and a concern for how we help to respond to those folks. We are not in a crisis mode at the moment, but that could change too. As you say, security is a fleeting thing. So I'd love to, unless there's anybody else who would like to speak at this moment, I actually think this is the conversation that ought to be preceding the specifics of an ordinance. And I'd love to bring it back to this table and ask folks who have far more experience than I do in trying to be responsive to folks in this situation, how you all want to try and handle this conversation going forward.
The people you're trying to help are right here.
So Adam, please, I've asked you twice. I'm not asking you to control the meeting. If you have something to say, ask for permission to speak and we'll do it.
Yes, sir.
My understanding, speaking with Travis this provides a framework for officers. So the least aggressive guy just biding his time till retirement, to the most aggressive newcomer that wants to arrest every jaywalker in the city. You don't have two levels or two different types of enforcement. You have a framework so that the next day Travis could come in and say, he responded to that campsite. It was on a sensitive area. What did you do? Because the policy says, you know, here's the things you can do. And did this person just say, oh, I want a place for free camping, and he moved along? Or was he in need of outreach, suitable housing, or another agency that could offer him help? Without this, you know, there's really no common thing for the officers to do. You're leaving up to individual officer discretion. And some guys may want that. Other guys may say, what do I do?
Can I just jump in for a second? It feels like this is a polarizing conversation because we don't have the solution. If we had a 50-bed, low-barrier homeless shelter for folks...
Could you speak up just a little?
It feels like this is, in some ways, a polarizing conversation because we don't have a 50-bed, low-barrier shelter where any one of us who encounters someone who's unsheltered could say, this is a safe place to be, right? And I think what we're trying to grapple with is the idea that regardless if there's an ordinance or not, there's still going to be limited resources or options to present to a person. I think we've spoken several times at the past few meetings about how can we, this group, support the city or support one of our community partner agencies in developing that solution. And I think we began to have conversations about what that might look like, whether that's cots in a church basement, whether that's operating inside an abandoned building, who knows what. But I feel like the ordinance is one thing, and I'm not going to say I'm for or against that, but separate to that is the actual solution, right? And with that, the ordinance almost if there is an adequate solution, what is the ordinance? It's almost nothing, right? Because an officer encounters someone and says, here you go, this is what we have to offer you. I think it can feel, at least in my opinion, it feels difficult because those options don't feel adequate in many ways. And I think that's something that folks grapple with throughout the state, and it isn't unique to Newport. All that to say, it almost feels like two separate productive conversations. The ordinance is one thing, which is very law enforcement and I would say Newport City centric. It's focused for them. Whereas the solutions, the sheltering, the resources, the services, is sort of the backbone to that ordinance. So I want to say I appreciate your comments, and I personally am here as a part of this sort of committee for more of the solutions, sheltering. And I think both of those conversations can't happen separately though, right? They're going to be interwoven and integrated. So all that to say, I'm not sure what our sort of agenda is for meetings moving forward, but it feels like we've been asked by Travis to participate in reviewing their ordinance, providing feedback as we did last meeting, and in the same time we'll be moving towards that conversation about solutions and sheltering. I can say Casey and I have already had some conversations that with a funding source that may be helping us out, pull as a piece of the puzzle to providing some sheltering options. So I think that's the complex part, is there isn't a pot of money that's going to come to us to say, here you go, here's the money to run and operate a shelter 365 days a year. We might have some money to operate a shelter when it's really, really cold out. And that's the gaps that we're going to have to sort of come up with. And maybe that is volunteers, and maybe that is reaching out to other citizens of Newport to get their ideas on how to fill. But I think we're still in the early stages of figuring out who, where, and when to sort of operationalize those things. That was a lot to say.
That was
Great.
well said, thank you. Anybody else want to speak?
I have a thought.
Go ahead, Sam.
So I want to jump off this. I think a combination of what everybody has said in this room, and I love your idea of like reaching out to the community with specific, like if we aren't going to get funding from, larger sources, then maybe a community-based project would be the best way to go about it. And I'm curious what, for our community members, what your optimal next step in shelter would be. I mean, with winter, it doesn't seem very pressing on a 90-degree day, but like obviously it's coming, and even before then, I mean, it's too hot to just like be outside all day. So what would be optimal for you, and can we like all come together for identifying a location or a building, and how much do we need for, what resources do we have? Do we want cots or something, and how much would that cost? Can we raise the money? Can we create a location ourselves rather than focusing on? And I think that'll make it less polarizing and like more integrated into the community, so everybody has ownership over a collective solution. That's what I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, riffing off both of, like, I appreciate what both of you said. Thinking about like how this interaction is also, the most closely related community that's done is the St. Johnsbury. And what the town of St. Johnsbury asked of providers was, we are going to make an ordinance. We would love for you to come in and provide us with your expertise of how to do that in a thoughtful way. And I think that is an important piece of this, is like, if the town is moving, the city of Newport is moving forward with an ordinance, then that's a decision that I think needs to be made as like, we are moving forward with this and we're looking for the support of this group to be able to do some of the work in here, to be able to assess the, make sure that it is supportive of the work that we're doing. If that is not on the table and an ordinance is still like question mark in the air whether or not we want to move forward with an ordinance, I think that's also something that would be helpful and prescriptive for us to be able to say, okay, we've got two different sides, what are the advantages of one versus the other? So I think for me personally, some clarity of like, regardless of if I, Casey Winterson, am sitting here on this team, is the city of Newport planning to move forward with an ordinance? And if the answer is yes, then we can all work to add in the pieces and parts that we think are important to be able to be human-centered in all of the things, which I think this has been doing. This is a very human-centered kind of, as much as you can be with a policy, it's a human-centered policy. So I think just for me, that like clarity of where the city of Newport stands, like regardless of this, we know we're moving forward with an ordinance would be helpful. And then we can be supportive as community partners of moving forward from that point.
Can I also ask that if you're going to really prioritize the ordinance, that you start from the beginning? Because when we got this, we got it the day of.
Yeah, that's fine. Gotcha.
But I don't think you should prioritize this. Let's prioritize all the other issues, like what's going to happen this winter? What's going to happen to the people in the tents? How are we going to get them food? How are we going to get them what they need? That's the priority. Their safety is imminently in danger because winter is coming.
I think the conversations are happening in other pockets by folks on this council. I think Pastor Wall was reaching out to some of his counterparts and church leaders to see what their appetite was to engage in this work. Casey and I, as part of the local housing coalition, had conversations with the Vermont Interfaith Foundation about funding they have earmarked and sort of prioritized for our region of the state, if we so pursue it, for an extreme cold weather shelter. And then I think what we're talking, in my mind at least, as I'm hearing these conversations and processing, is like, where do we get the rest of the funding, right? And who do we have that can operate this shelter? And are we going to be able to meet all of the requirements necessary to get access to that grant money? And if not, back to the table. But I don't necessarily know if maybe that is an update or a conversation we have at our next meeting. But I don't necessarily know that is or needs to be as sort of robust or public discussion. Does that make sense? I don't mean that it needs to be private per se, but I don't necessarily think it hasn't felt like sort of that's been necessary for this table to discuss robustly. I think we've been having it in productive ways and we're moving in the right direction.
That's great, but if you don't have that, then what?
Sure.
And then you have another solution, and then you have another, and if they don't pan out, then what?
Sure, that's valid.
So I guess, I want to, my suggestion about how to move forward is that we are not talking about an either-or situation. And it does seem to me reasonable for this group of people to make a commitment that we're not going to take just one piece of a solution, just an ordinance, or just a solution for short-term overnight homelessness to the council, that our intention is to go to the council with a package deal, in effect, and say, these are the recommendations that we make about what the next steps are to try and solve this problem. Because I agree entirely, Ann, with what you're saying, that there is a whole lot more we should be talking about here than just enforcement of an ordinance. And I hear loud and clear from our chief of police that it would be useful if he had a consistent policy that his officers could be tasked with enforcing. And the only thing you said that I fully disagreed with, actually, was that it should be just entirely left up to the conscience of an individual officer. Because you and I both know the rabbit hole that can lead us down. So whether,
I talked about the policy.
no, I understand. I understand. But what I'm saying is, the chief is asking us, right now, in the absence of an ordinance, it is a capricious system. And what he's asking us for is something that is written in a way that the community can affirm and stand behind, and is compassionate, that his officers can then enforce. I don't think that's an unreasonable request, unless it is not accompanied by the rest of the conversation, which I fully agree is actually the most important conversation, which is how do we make sure that people who are insecure have some safe place to go.
And you are asking people who belong to organizations who are tasked with helping people who have various needs. You're asking them to sign off on an ordinance. That's not really okay.
No, I don't know how else to do it. Of course it's okay. The people who are, I'm glad to have the folks in the room who are here today, and I'm glad to have the folks around this table who have agreed, because they're all in one way or another having...
They agreed to come and talk about the issue of homelessness.
No, forgive me, Ann, but that's not what they agreed to. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the title itself of this task force makes it clear that we're dealing with more than one thing here, and that we're trying to do it holistically. I don't think anyone was brought to this table under false pretense.
You might want to ask their agencies if they support their members signing off on an ordinance, which is about control. It is.
So I don't know, do you all want to respond to that? Because I feel like we set this up pretty carefully, and we reached out to the agencies and said, here's the title, here's the task, we defined what the task was, and it was to do all of this, not one piece of it, right? So I'd love to hear if I'm wrong about that.
In my perspective, I'm here to participate in a conversation that leads towards having solutions for folks that are experiencing housing insecurity and homelessness. I by no means would say that I was signing off on an ordinance for the police.
Just to be clear, the city council and/or the voters of Newport actually sign off and create the ordinance. The agencies at the table, the ordinance is, Ann would look at it as an end all.
I'm sorry.
You would look at the ordinance as just an end, like nothing happens after that. I look at it as a funnel where the officers could say, okay, you're in this situation, this is where I can help you to look for resources. And the various agencies accomplish different things. Somebody needs mental health. We have human services. If they need housing assistance or someplace to go, perhaps the NEK could help them, or the pastor. It is basically, I don't view it as an end. The ordinance is designed, it's not going to solve homelessness or unhoused. I don't know that there is a way to do that. But this is going to bring individuals into contact with the appropriate agencies. Because right now, you go down Main Street, Newport, if you're, sleeping outside, don't know what you're doing, there's no signs that say, hey, come in here, we'll help you. Or check this person, they'll help you. There's nothing. It's the police are going to be probably your first contact, and it's nice to be able to arm them with resources.
I like the word arm that you use, because that's what it feels like. You're arming them with something that can move them right out of
Okay,
Newport.
so here's what I'd like to do, because I think we've got the issues on the table, and actually, I'm pleased that we're having this conversation, because this is underlying everything else that we're going to talk about and that we've been talking about for the past month and a half. So it's just fine with me that we don't have an actual answer to this. We are not going to come to a conclusion tonight about the language for an ordinance. All we've got at the moment is work that the Chief and Travis, have done to try and create some language for us to look at. And we've got people in the room who are quite likely to have an opinion about that. And I for one would like to hear what their opinions are about that. So my recommendation is we take the time that we have left today and look at this ordinance together. And I have no intention as mayor of putting anything like a recommendation before the council anytime soon. We've got more work to do before we get anywhere close. And I would be pleased to come back and actually thrash out some of the options that Casey and Chris and others have been talking about for this winter, because I agree entirely with your assessment that it can't be allowed to slip off the table. It's got to be an equally high priority to talk about what security looks like for everybody, including people who don't have a place to live.
Can I say something brief? First off, I try never to speak for other people, but Travis Bingham is not here, and after spending several hours with him and crafting this and talking about the process, I'm fairly confident in saying that there are currently encampments, maybe not of multiple tents, but there are people camping in areas that fall under his department's jurisdiction that are not problematic, they're not in a sensitive area, and he has no desire to go and uproot them and move them anywhere. He's not waiting on a policy to do so. And there's a fine line between saying you're not impeding any of these public services or areas that are a detriment to either the public or your own personal welfare, and so we're going to leave you alone and let you establish a temporary home here and not harass you, opposed to saying, here is this place on public land and we're telling you you have permission to set up an encampment there. Well, that's a whole different level of direction. You're establishing something at that point. Even if you're just saying it's okay, you're basically giving them tacit permission that this piece of land that's public land, that you would need some act of the city council or whatever governing body that owns that land to actually make that decision. And I see it very likely that if Travis or one of his officers had an encounter with somebody that was experiencing homelessness and they were in an area where it was prohibited, handing them a copy of the ordinance, it's not written, I don't think, in extremely high legal language, and even if there was a difficulty in interpreting it, he could show them these are the areas that are no-goes areas, right? You can't be on a public sidewalk. You can't be around the water processing area, or on the property of the high school or whatever the case may be where it's spelled out. That leaves a pretty wide area. As long as it's not one of these handful of places, then you have a pretty good likelihood and it's not on private property without the permission of the property owner, you have a pretty good likelihood of not being interfered with. Like, I know there's at least a couple of campsites on Crawford Road that are existing, and there's no intent that he expressed to me to go and do anything to harass or move those people. They're where they are able to be right now, and they're not bothering anybody. They're, it's not in the way of any public services, and so it's not a problem. So anyway, that's just
Is what Travis is saying of concern to anybody other than me?
So Pam, I'm really not prepared for this to be framed in the way you just framed it. We are all of us trying to put opinions out there and trying to respect one another's opinions. Okay, so I'm not looking for people to gang up on somebody and agree they disagree. If you have something to say,
I hear that
say it.
as doing absolutely nothing with somebody's sense of security. what you're saying is, okay, so there's probably some places, you can figure them out all by yourself, where you can pitch your tent. But there's no guarantee you can stay there. There's nothing that induces any sense of stability or security. And if you don't have that, how the hell do you ever get your life together to move on?
No, I agree. That's the other prong of this whole effort. This is just one small piece of this, is the police requested something to use as a framework.
Right.
The other part is the rest of
And the ordinance
the process.
itself is an overwhelming document. How would you like me to read it? By flashlight, you know, in my little tent, as I'm struggling to make sense of it? I realize that I understand the language is not that complex, but it is if you're trying to figure it out. It doesn't tell you anything positive. It tells you what you can't do. And it tells you what the consequences are if you don't magically get to figure out what it is that you can do.
Okay, so knowing that we are not trying to pass any kind of, we're not trying to take action on this today, we've just got a starting point to talk about, which is going to absolutely change in the process of talking about it. I want to say again, I would like to dedicate some significant time today to trying to actually hear what the words are and hear what people have to say about them.
Here.
Okay, so my inclination is, given the fact that some people are just seeing this for the first time, that I'll just read a section and then we can pause and see if people want to make any comments. I will ask people to keep your comments brief in the process, and let's not repeat ourselves on every one of them, shall we? Let's make sure we make the points we want to make. So section 1 of this document says, purpose and intent. City of Newport adopts this ordinance to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of its residents, particularly children, elderly individuals, and those who are vulnerable to harm due to disability, illness, and environmental risk. The ordinance seeks to maintain safe and accessible public spaces for all members of the community, prevent health and safety hazards associated with unsanctioned encampments, protect children and vulnerable populations near schools, daycares, and other sensitive locations, and clarify municipal authority and process for addressing life safety risks on public property. The ordinance is not intended to criminalize homelessness or penalize individuals solely for lack of stable housing, displace individuals involuntarily without due consideration of shelter availability, outreach efforts, or service coordination. It's not intended to prohibit peaceful use of public spaces unless specific health, safety, or access conditions are compromised. And it's not intended to undermine the dignity of individuals who are experiencing poverty, mental illness, addiction, or trauma. It's the city's intent to pursue a balanced approach, one that honors human dignity and compassion while taking seriously its duty to safeguard the community and public infrastructure. Go ahead, Casey.
The fourth bullet under the nots, just making a distinguishment, I would say adding the word.
Can you say it louder and so all of us can hear it?
Yeah. Under the fourth bullet, undermine the dignity of individuals experiencing poverty, mental illness, addiction, or trauma. It's just a language thing of adding the word those experiencing homelessness, because poverty doesn't necessarily mean homelessness.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'm taking notes on this. Travis's intent and eyes when he gets back from, I forget where he is.
On vacation.
Edit these.
Are there other comments about this opening section? Anybody else want to say anything?
I don't know what an unsanctioned encampment is. And I don't know what a sanctioned encampment is. Prevent health and safety hazards associated with unsanctioned encampments. Are you going to sanction some encampments?
That is a good distinction.
Fair enough. It's a good question.
Could we add in definitions?
Over here?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that no one's going to get penalized under section 1, but if you actually look at section 7, you're penalizing everybody.
Okay, we're gonna get there.
I know, but I just want that to
Fair
be
enough.
aware.
Thank you. Okay, can we move on to section 2?
Wait, sorry, I lied. Maybe in lieu of the comment that was just made.
It just speaks to the.
I don't know. It's hard.
It is hard.
In lieu of the comment that was just made, I think being able to add the word initially penalize.
Yeah.
Because the plan is that, based on my understanding, is that it is kind of a warning, and if nothing is done as a result of the warning, that would be the point at which someone would be penalized. But it wouldn't be an initial, like, you're here, here's a ticket, or you're here, you're being arrested. So that might be to help in clarifying that.
Okay, let's keep going. The next section is definitions. Encampment is one or more individuals inhabiting a location for temporary shelter or residence, including tents, makeshift structures, bedding, or other indicators of overnight habitation. Public property is any city-owned or controlled land, including sidewalks, green belts, parks, rights-of-way, roadways, municipal easements. Sensitive locations are any location serving minors or vulnerable individuals, including but not limited to schools, licensed daycare facilities, adult care centers, public playgrounds. And a life safety hazard is any location or condition posing imminent risk of serious injury or death, which could include but not be limited to extreme weather exposure, proximity to active transportation, corridors like railroads or highways, high-risk environmental zones, like areas that are flood-prone or fire-prone, and areas obstructing emergency access.
And I already know that we want to look at eliminating the first bullet.
Yes, we talked at the last meeting, you're saying, about whether it's our job as a city to determine whether or not weather conditions are extreme enough for us to enforce something against someone's will. So we're going to erase that entirely.
And with respect to proximity to active transportation corridors, it seems to me that if you are underneath an overpass, you may be close to a transportation corridor, but it is also providing you with some shelter. And therefore, it's not all proximity to active transportation corridors that are problematic.
It's a great question.
And I would say as a paramedic, you never expect the car accident to happen where it does, and I've responded to plenty under.
I can get in a car accident by simply jaywalking or not even jaywalking across the street. Car accidents can't be, you can't predict that all of a sudden somebody's going to go off the highway. And if they do and you're underneath, you're not going to be hurt. That car is going elsewhere. It's not coming down immediately. It's going at a...
No, I'm talking about the highway going under the overpass. Most overpasses go over...
Anywhere except Newport, most overpasses do that. I mean, our own...
Oh, certainly not if there's not a road underneath, but if you're on... whatever.
You're talking about bridges, not more than overpasses, right? An overpass would be...
I'm talking about like the freeway or the interstate where the road
This
goes
talks
under.
about railways and highways, and I'm talking about you can be underneath them through any kind of thing that goes over them, and you can be having some protection from the weather, and it shouldn't just be worded that way.
Fair enough. We'll come back to it. Anything else you want to say, anybody?
The other thing is a high-risk environmental zone. So if you choose to live near, if you want to set up your tent near a river, it seems because the water's there, you can wash your clothes, and there might be a flood sometime. I don't think that it's fair to decide that people can't be in such a zone. So I think your definition of high-risk environmental zone, I mean, can you say people haven't had terrible floods until recently in Vermont for the most part?
I can speak to that.
Go ahead.
Totally agree. I think someone being in a river is very important for a lot of reasons. What I will say is during the last floods, not this one that just happened last week, but last year, we had a significant amount of individuals that nearly lost their lives underneath some of the bridges in St. Johnsbury. And the response in St. J was not necessarily you can't be next to the river. It's more like you can't be in the lull of the river where that's gonna flood first. So there are folks that are by some of the rivers in St. Johnsbury, but they're up maybe 10 feet off, and that's not been an issue. So I think that could be a distinguisher of a comment to have, for sure.
Go ahead.
My question's about the flood thing. Okay, so if you're not allowed to camp here, then how come there's houses that can actually be on the rivers in the flood zones and everything? Right. That doesn't make no sense to me. Yeah. How are they allowed to live there in the houses? It's not much good. It's either the wording is wrong or something needs to change on that.
I have an idea.
Yeah.
I feel like this section in particular could really use like a fairly specific map. Like, I think it would be useful to know if you're in a flood zone when you're setting up camp. But you don't necessarily, that doesn't have to be a determination as to whether you can stay there or not. But I do think that some places near the road are not safe, and I do think that there are other places that could be. So maybe this could just be more specific in terms of like geospatially. We physically go to the locations or ask where you feel comfortable staying and identify them based on that, which would be obviously be a much bigger project than just like writing bullet points. But if this is a serious concern, then.
So there's more definition further down, by the way, as far as proximity. A lot of this is summarized in the beginning.
Gotcha.
Okay, can we keep going?
Yes.
Encampments in high sensitivity areas. Located in or adjacent to areas identified below present unacceptable risks to public safety, child protection, and infrastructure access, and shall be subject to immediate removal with no prior notice required. Those include schools and child-serving locations. Any encampment within 500 feet would be prohibited. The buffer would include all property boundaries, athletic fields, parking lots, adjacent sidewalks, wooded buffers, any other associated areas used regularly by children or staff. Playgrounds and recreational facilities, no encampment within any municipal playground, youth sports field, public park, splash pad, pavilion, etc. School bus stops and transit shelters prohibited at or within 300 feet of a regularly used student pickup or drop-off point or transit shelters on school routes. Daycare and adult facilities, no encampment within 300 feet of licensed daycare, preschool, elder care, or adult care. Other sensitive municipal sites include cemeteries, community gardens, off-leash dog parks, transit centers, public trails, pathways, critical water infrastructure such as water towers, reservoirs, treatment plants, and pump stations. That was all under 3A. 3B would be life safety and hazard zones, transportation and infrastructure corridors, no encampments within 50 feet of railway tracks, highway ramps, medians, bridge underpasses, or other active transportation rights of way, which I think, Ann, speaks to your question.
Yeah, and I don't think it's satisfactory in terms of...
Fair enough, fair enough. Number 2, flood-prone and environmental risk areas, prohibited in mapped floodplains, culverts, riverbanks, drainage areas, steep or unstable slopes, or FEMA-designated flood zones. High traffic and pedestrian obstructed areas, no encampment in fire lanes, utility easements, sidewalks, and commercial corridors, municipal parking lots without prior approval, and within 10 feet of fire hydrants and emergency access points. Fire and combustion hazards, prohibited in areas with open flames, discarded needles, combustible waste, open electrical splices, illegal wiring, hazardous materials such as gasoline or propane tanks. And we raised questions last time about this extreme cold weather condition one again. And I think we agreed the last one to just strike it entirely. 3C, public health and safety. Following conditions require immediate encampment removal when present. Any confirmed infectious diseases at the encampment site, excessive vermin or biological contaminants, including, for example, blood or fecal matter, encampments interfering with water or wastewater treatment facility operations, declared public health emergencies, sites requiring environmental cleanup or restoration, encampments obstructing first responders or essential government functions, encampments that place individuals in areas that actively violate terms of parole or probation, which would include but not be limited to locations prohibited for registered sex offenders, pervasive criminal activity or repeated emergency calls, damage to critical infrastructure such as reservoirs, bridges, utilities, or drainage systems, unsafe storage or accumulation of combustible or hazardous materials, encampments located on privately owned land where the city has received a request to intervene from the property owner and authorized representative, Goodness, this one goes on forever. Why don't I stop there? Yeah, that was a lot. I thought it was shorter.
It's just that.
Well, there's more. I've got 3, D, E, F, continuing is what I'm saying. So anybody want to make comments about any of that part? Go ahead.
I'm a little bit confused on the last part of the 3C part. Anybody, it doesn't matter if you're homeless or not, can make any of those violations right there, period. So why would that be just directed into this whole thing right here?
I think that's a very good question. That the last one is enforceable no matter what. You don't need a particular ordinance identifying folks who are unhoused as a particular culprit.
What you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, I'm agreeing with the point. Tell me your name again.
Crystal.
Crystal, that's what I thought. Thanks, Crystal.
Remind myself to hurry up. Maybe I'll just sit here. My comment/question is, I know high sensitivity zones are zero tolerance zones, and I understand the word immediate in that case. But thinking about like, if somebody is on, this is more for like, maybe not the public parks that we know the ordinance of like, you can't be in Gardner Park between, after dark, but like, if the town owns land somewhere and somebody is camping there, does it really necessitate an immediate, you need to go now? Like I get like being at like trying to set up a tent by a school or on school property, like that makes logical sense to me. But some of these places on this list, not all of them, but lead me to question, like if someone's in a transit shelter and it's pouring rain out and it's the only place that they have, would we immediately tell them that they need to go? Or would it be, you need to be gone by 24 hours or what have you? So that was just, I circled immediate in both 3 before 3A and also under 3C of what truly necessitates immediate. And what is the notice that's going to be given for some of these things? Like if someone is in a place that is got, I don't know, pervasive criminal activities or repeated emergency calls, but they're actually not maybe the person that needs to legally be dealt with, and they just happen to be there because it's a group of people that they maybe feel safe by, what sort of warning are we giving those individuals rather than saying, pack up, you've got to go now? I'm not saying that that's what would happen, but that's how I read it.
Go ahead.
With respect to utility easements, I do not really know where any of the easements are. And sometimes you go, utility easements may be underground, you wouldn't even begin to know where they were. I don't really understand what that's doing there at all.
Which number is that, please?
3.
They're all 3.
3 under 3.
Oh, I'm sorry, 3B3.
Thank you.
And sorry, one other 3B4. Gasoline makes logical sense to me. If someone's got a small propane tank they're using to heat their space, which is something that is common in tents, and can be done safely. I guess my question is, and I think we kind of brought this up last time as well, but what is kind of what's the damage of that?
I will say on the utility easements, I don't know all the places in Newport, but if we did have like large widespread outages, if there were encampments across utility easements, it could block the folks who would be responding to restore power. They may not be able to access what they need. But I don't know where all the easements are in Newport.
Any other comments on this section?
I'm looking at 3C again. Can you give us a chance?
Sure.
I think pervasive criminal activity or repeated emergency calls. You know, people could have calls for any number of reasons to the site of their tent. You know, somebody could be ill and need to have somebody come to pick them up and take them to the hospital. So I don't think repeated emergency calls indicates anything with regard to you having to be immediately decamped or removed.
Okay, can I move us on? Okay. 3D, environmental protection zones. Encampments may not be established or maintained in locations that compromise environmental integrity or disrupt designated outdoor uses. Immediate removal is warranted in the following cases. The location obstructs or impedes an established outdoor activity or use, such as mountain biking trails, public hiking paths, or nature education areas. The location is within an area the city has designated as environmentally sensitive, protected, or ecologically fragile, or there is visible or documented evidence of impairment to a natural resource, such as soil erosion, water contamination, wildlife disturbance, or deforestation. I'll stop there.
Do we have any locations in the city that have been designated as environmentally sensitive, protected,
but we've never respected them, so.
or ecologically fragile?
Travis had mentioned one spot in particular, but I'm not familiar. It's a farm.
Yeah, you're talking about Bluffside Farm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly, there are areas. You know, that what comes to my mind is the area around the wetlands area there with pedestrian bridges.
And you can also pull that all the way around the lake. But it would be really wrong to do that.
I don't know. I think it's an important question.
Yes.
You know, there are areas that I could imagine that we would consider it to be a danger to the area itself, where we're trying to actually bring a wildlife area back to life, or an ecologically deforested area or whatever. So.
We could, but that would be way in the future, and I say that as somebody who works with organizations who do that, and I know how blocked we get at every step along the way, because in fact I've been before the city council and asked about protecting areas and got blown off very loudly and very strongly. So.
So you don't find it at all ironic that you're now arguing the opposite side of the question?
No, I am arguing. Well,
Sounds like you're saying.
Because I'm actually telling you, Ann, that I think your case in that case was. I'm sorry, Ann. Sorry.
I think this is just one more way of making it harder.
I hear that.
Talking about 2 or 3 people is just bullshit.
I hear that.
And the Bluff Farm is now public property.
Right, it's not.
It's a land trust.
It's a land trust.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think it's gray area in terms of the city's right to enforce it, for sure.
To enforce anything about it being sensitive.
But can we not worry about that today? Because I don't think actually we can resolve that question today. Anybody else want to speak now?
I got just the same question around what immediate removal means, because a lot of these places to me seem like things that you don't have to pack up and go right now. We're giving you X amount of notice before you leave. And my only other question was similar to what folks were asking is who designates environmentally sensitive and by how?
Yeah.
And then that's typically when I read protected or ecologically fragile, usually that's the state's designation of like this is a wetland zone and that's why we can't do so. That was just same thing of like how putting some guidelines of like it has to be designated by the town, by the city rather, of one of those places.
Okay, can I read the next section? 3E, I think, goes to where Crystal was pointing us earlier, at least in part. Enforcement. Immediate removal shall be authorized for encampments in these zones or exhibiting these conditions without prior notice. The Newport police chief or designated official shall document removal actions and provide outreach or shelter referrals when safely feasible. Refusal to vacate may result in a civil citation or arrest, particularly when vulnerable populations or essential services are implicated.
The second part of that, the Newport Police Chief or designee, that's important because in the future, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but there may be a position within the city, a non-law enforcement position that deals specifically with this issue. So it's important to realize that this ordinance can and will evolve as the situations dictate.
And may I point out that with regard to enforcement, you were saying that there's nothing about arrest anywhere in this ordinance, and there it is. The Newport Police Chief or his designee shall document and provide outreach or shelter, I'm sorry, wrong section. Refusal to vacate may result in civil citation or arrest, particularly when vulnerable populations or essential services are implicated. Arrest is there.
Yeah, I guess that would be spelled out in the statutes, for example, impeding emergency services.
But you probably could be arrested for those things anyway. You don't need this ordinance.
No, but it's...
I don't think...
Actually, I'm not sure that's true, and I'd want to be careful and thoughtful about that, right? Like, one of the things that Travis has talked with me about is his desire to have things in his toolbox that are short of having to cite someone, trying to find things that actually give him options short of citing someone for a criminal offense, right? And I think this is an example. I don't quite know where I want to go with that. Like, I don't have an end to my sentence. I'm just saying I understand Travis's intent, Travis, our police chief's intent, in trying to figure out, can we create kind of a tiered system by which we have options to try and help people move to a different spot that isn't putting others at risk or perceived risk.
Well, no police officer is supposed to arrest anybody unless they have probable cause to believe a crime is being committed or has been committed.
Correct, and this ordinance doesn't provide that. This ordinance, the penalties, the maximum penalties are on the back. The arrest is for a violation of the state statute.
Well, this says refusal to vacate may result in civil citation or arrest. So the arrest needs to go.
So it's the refusal of the lawful order to vacate. This would provide the framework to make the request to vacate lawful, and then the refusal to abide by a law. Refusing a lawful order from a law enforcement officer, I would think in almost every state is
you can refuse to do something that an officer suggests you should do if he has no right to suggest that you do it.
Have you met the public defender? That was a career.
I understand. Crystal?
Okay, so with what she's saying on that 3E, the bullet, the point 3, like I said, it's not just about me, but I'm using myself as an example here. I'm trying to better myself. Like I said, I got my LNA license. I didn't choose to be homeless, but I am, and I'm making do. I don't cause problems for anybody. I make sure my stuff is all cleaned up and everything. She's taking classes next to me. So my question is that I can easily, like if I get cited for something, that goes on my record. And if I go to court, I can't work till I can go to court and get that taken care of. They will not let me work. That's where my issue is. And then like I have asked NEK-TV and I've asked her ability to help me get scrubs for work and everything, and they can't help me. There's nothing they can do. They told me to go like to local hospitals and ask them if they have like donations there. Like the whole thing of trying to find people that are going to be able to help, like you got NEK and stuff. You go to them, you tell them their situation, but if you don't qualify under their guidelines, you're screwed. So, but I'm like leaning towards the whole thing of like I'm trying to better myself. Eventually, as soon as I start getting work, I want to. Like I applied for an apartment through somebody through here, but because I got evicted over 6 years ago from my apartment, this other person won't give me a time of day because of that. which that's not fair either. So that's gonna make it even harder for me to find a place once I start working.
Not only that, a lot of us are on disability too, and they get so much a month.
Right. Adam?
If anybody has any connections in the hospital, I'll pick up the scrubs. She's about to start working for the same company I work for. So if anybody has connects, I'll go pick them up. If not, I get paid Thursday, I'll buy you a pair of scrubs. You want it done?
Casey?
There's so many different things.
I know.
One is, if you need scrubs, I will get them for you, because we do have scrubs at the thrift store. Seymour Thrift Store?
Yeah, where?
Seymour Thrift Store?
No, I've been down here to this one.
Yes, that's the Seymour Thrift Store.
Oh, okay.
There's some scrubs
Well,
there.
because they gave me a voucher
Yep.
for clothes.
Okay.
But then when I went yesterday for the food shop, they told me I couldn't.
Okay.
Because
Let's
they're-
talk offline. I will
Okay.
probably, oh, okay, I get what you're saying.
Yes,
I will help you.
and I believe the person,
Um,
the gentleman that was taking my name at the food shop went and talked to you. Actually, and I was told no, that could not get help.
Interesting.
So, just letting you know.
I don't remember that conversation, but what I will say is I think we also have to separate that 3E. And in my mind, 3E is not talking about all encampments. It is talking about very specifically some of these
Good.
high
It's like it's
sensitivity
punishing
zones.
everybody, huh?
Yeah. No, I know. And I don't disagree. I think that, for instance, if you are camping in a school parking lot and a police officer asks you to leave, which theoretically no one would think to do, but if a police officer says you have to leave and you say no, that could go to trespassing and lawful and all of that stuff. So I think that, like, in my mind, the enforcement that we're talking about right now is as it relates to saying that these high sensitivity areas, saying no if you're asked to leave. What I would like clarification on is what, again, I've said it every time the word immediate has come up, but like, what is immediate? And after that, what is immediate? Like, what is the step process? So like, if immediate means you're gonna get a warning and you're gonna have 48 hours, and then the department will come back and say, oh, you're still here, we've told you to leave. Unfortunately now, because you didn't leave, we're gonna have to cite you for it. Would that be like step one? And then if nobody does, or if something goes awry, whatever normally could happen, it would lead to an arrest. Or the third time they come back, if they're still there, they've been cited once, and now they're being arrested. And for what it's worth, I fundamentally agree with everything that Ann and Pam have said around, we can't arrest our way out of homelessness. That is something that I also believe that Travis knows that. Travis, the police chief, knows that and also fundamentally agrees with that. So I don't know what that means, but I was just like,
The time frame in section 4 is actually longer, 72 hours, and maybe if they're, so perhaps not everything in one of these areas would rise to the level of immediate. So maybe if there's some wording around flexibility.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Immediacy of removal would be helpful.
Yeah, like going through what is the high sensitivity zones and the life safety and hazard zones, and really teasing out like, okay, this for sure. Like if somebody's camped in a school playground, like that is an immediate, yes, you need to leave now. But if they're camped across the road, which still is within that 300 feet, and they are in the woods somewhere, but they just happen to be within that circle, that would be okay. We're not asking you to leave right now, but we're gonna give you 72 hours or what have you to get to move from here, because this space is not an eligible place.
Sure.
Go ahead, Chris.
I just had another question that just got brought to my attention over here. The whole shelter, provide outreach for shelter referrals when safely feasible. When is it feasible?
Yeah, that's a really great question. That's the one I circled, actually. I think that's a great question.
100%.
Because I've done enough work with our institutions to know that sometimes there just aren't options. So,
And there are times that folks, even if we provide a shelter referral and have a bed, they will ultimately choose not to utilize that shelter space, even on 0 degree and below 0 degree nights. So that is definitely a good point.
Okay, lots more to talk about there. We keep going? 3F, purpose of designation and compassion enforcement. Any designation or removal action is not intended to penalize individuals who are camping under emergency or unavoidable circumstances. Rather, this designation prioritizes the removal and relocation of encampments in recognition of serious public health, safety, and environmental concerns. The city acknowledges that some individuals experiencing homelessness may be unaware they have established an encampment in a high sensitivity or hazard zone. This ordinance aims in part to educate and assist those individuals by connecting them with community services and offering relocation options to safer sites. All enforcement and removal actions should be conducted in a manner that respects the dignity and humanity of the individuals affected, minimizing trauma and disruption whenever possible. Nothing in this ordinance shall be interpreted as permitting or affirmatively allowing camping on public property controlled by the city. Rather, it provides a framework for responding to emergency situations with both firmness and compassion.
So does this mean that your police officer is going to offer a relocation option to a safer site? He's going to say,
It certainly doesn't seem to say that to me. It does not seem to say that to me.
It does not say it to me.
In fact, I think it actually says kind of the opposite in that last paragraph, which is we're not implying that there are sites where you're automatically allowed. I mean, this is the problem we've got kind of on a conceptual level, right? Like, if you designate a place where it is allowed, then there are concerns that it draws an entire group of people. And we've seen communities in other places in the country that have tried that approach and eventually ended up in a bind that they can't work their way out of.
Well, you can predict, though, how many people could occupy a particular site, 5 campsites,
I understand.
or whatever. And if you know that there are only 4 occupied there, you could tell somebody they could move to another. But otherwise, you're lying when you say this ordinance aims to assist those individuals by connecting them with community services and by offering relocation options to safer sites. It's lovely that you would do that, but you have said specifically you don't intend to.
I hear you. Crystal?
Actually, I'm going off what she just said. As far as the community service, what is there community servicing offering relocation or even safe places for us to even stay or camp?
That's what we were just gonna say too. Like where can we go?
Like, it's not outlined as far as like where you can safely stay, really. You're saying where we can't stay.
Exactly.
I think this is, in some ways it goes back to the first question that we had on the table this afternoon for the first 45 minutes, which is how do we go back to the city council with something that isn't simply a list of prohibitions, but is proactive in its desire to provide safe, reasonable options to people.
What would that be? Most ordinances are this sort of.
I don't know whether it fits in here or not. What I'm saying is, as mayor, I would rather not. It's going to have to push me pretty hard for me to go to the council with an ordinance that isn't matched with options. Now, whether or not they can be built into the ordinance is a different question.
Can I ask you folks here, taking time out of your day to come in and sort of voice your opinions, would it be possible for you all to maybe put down a list of places you've seen or been to in Newport that you thought, hey, this would be better than another place? Is that something feasible, you guys? Not to put more work on
But
you.
can I also say something though? I've been in a few different areas, and I'll be honest with you, and this is going to put down some people, and I'm not trying to when I say this, but I've been into areas where you go camping and it's completely trashed. I'll clean that up myself, and I will dispose of the garbage myself. But I'm always keeping my stuff, it's clean where I am, and I leave it clean. I think that's an issue as far as going to camp, and you should be able to be, I think that you need to be responsible enough to clean up after yourself. But I'm just saying there is places that are around that are really disgusting because people just up and trash it and they leave it. I mean, they'll leave their tent, whatever, so they don't have to food, everything. I mean, it can be disgusting at times. I'm going to be honest. I mean, not everybody's perfect. Neither am I. But I know that I do clean up after myself, and everybody here does too. But
It's a great point. So it's 5 o'clock. That's our stated time that we typically end.
Okay.
We could probably run through the last of these in another 10 minutes, or we can put it off till the next time. What would you all like to do?
I'm fine with hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, for another 10 minutes, y'all okay? All right, I'm going to move on to number 4, section 4. Notice of enforcement procedure, timing of removal. Removal encampments shall, whenever feasible, occur during daylight hours, that is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on business days. If the end of a warning period falls outside these hours, removal shall be deferred to the next available daylight period. Just to say, we're telling the police they can't walk in and just disrupt somebody at 9 o'clock at night or 1 in the morning. Non-emergency violations for encampments in violation but not presenting immediate life safety concerns. Written notice will be posted 72 hours in advance. Notice will include information about available services, shelter options, and contacts for case management referrals when possible. Emergency situations or sensitive zones, encampments located within prohibited zones or presenting clear risk may be removed with expedited notice and without delay if conditions warrant. City staff will document the decision and offer assistance if safely feasible. Property handling. Unattended personal property will be collected, inventoried, and stored for no less than 30 days with reasonable access for retrieval. Items posing health or safety risks may be disposed of.
I think maybe in bullet 2 is where we could strengthen that, take out the where feasible or when possible.
Yes, exactly.
And just mandate that along with the enforcement action comes at least the referrals if they choose to accept it.
I'd also add something that I think has been really successful in St. Johnsbury is when they are going to provide a written notice to be posted, service agencies go along with the PD. So NECA will go and usually NKHS will go. And there's a direct contact right there that can start. And it's not always successful. Sometimes folks aren't home. But that is really something that I would maybe not as a mandate, but as like as a procedural piece of this that comes out of it. My only other question was around like whenever feasible under A. Just some sort of definition of whenever feasible. What does that mean? What are we considering feasible? What are the reasons why it wouldn't be feasible and they'd have to be directly removed right then? And then the only other one was for bullet D, and I know that you probably don't have this yet, but where is the property going? Because I think that should be plans for that. Yeah. But once we get some sort of plan, that should probably be a part of the document.
Yeah, I think there's current practices. They have a place they store it all here at the PD down in the basement. Crystal?
The whole notice of the included information about available services, shelter options, and contact the case manager and referrals when possible. Like, again, where do we get that kind of information on like referrals and shelter options and things like that? Who do we go see?
Last time I did that, guys didn't help me anymore with that stuff.
Because NECA said we were told NECA to give out tents because cops doesn't want them to give them out, is what we were told. But whether that is true or not, that's what we were told.
I think that's why ideally is the service providers will accompany the police when they do the outreach. And I think to your previous statement, as policy and funding streams change, they exchange rapidly. So actually having that staff go with the police to provide the most up-to-date information would make the most sense. But your point is well taken. Things are always changing.
But I mean, also the other thing is like, I literally have to stay here in Newport. I can't just say like, you can give me a shelter in St. J. I don't have a car or anything, so I don't have that transportation. So I walk or I may ride a bike to get where I need to go. And that's how I've always done it. So that doesn't gonna work for everybody if they don't have a vehicle to get from St. J to get to their job here in Newport, say if they have one.
I think part of this conversation, after the ordinance piece of it is looking at possible options that could actually be in Newport.
All right, because they don't have the RCT bus that goes around to help you get to point A to point B to do your shopping anymore.
Right.
You literally have to call up and make an arrangement to be able to go. That makes it hard.
Okay, yep, Pam, and then I'm gonna move us on.
One of the other ways we make it really hard is we don't have trash cans available.
Yeah, this is on my list too.
And that is by design, as Kevin will tell you, we have asked repeatedly at City Council, and what we were told was if we put trash cans on the street, people will use them. That's serious.
I'm sorry.
You heard that, Kevin. That was why we don't have trash cans.
So I'll just say, Pam, it's a conversation that I would be willing to re-entertain the conversation because I have similar concerns for everybody, right? It's hard on our visitors, it's hard on the people who live here, it's hard on everybody that there's no place to put trash except to go into a public business, or, a private business.
And then we blame people for making a mess of dropping litter on us.
We don't have money for that.
I never said that.
He did say that.
You're saying Paul said it.
Pullman said
Yeah, you're
that.
saying two different things. You're saying you never said it.
No, he said you heard it.
Right.
Oh, I heard
You
it.
were there when he said it.
Yeah, I thought you said it. I said
No,
that.
no, Pullman said it, so Florida.
Okay, I'm gonna move us along. We're almost done, everybody. Thanks for your patience. Law enforcement and arrest guidelines in section 5. This ordinance does not make homelessness a criminal offense. Arrest and citation shall be a last resort reserved only for 1, refusal to comply with lawful notice after a reasonable opportunity to vacate. 2, willful obstruction of public safety personnel or infrastructure. 3, criminal behavior already prohibited under state law, drug trafficking, vandalism, threats, etc. Law enforcement officers are encouraged to use discretion, seek voluntary compliance whenever possible, referring individuals to available services and shelter resources first. Go ahead, Crystal.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. We're glad you're
The
here.
best rate here could be anybody. It's directed specifically towards people that are homeless, but that could be anybody for 1. But 2, the whole drug trafficking thing, all of that, if we're homeless, if you're homeless and don't have the money, how are you going to do drug trafficking?
How are people drug trafficking?
Or
Anybody can do that.
yeah, anybody. The vandalism can happen, the threats can happen.
So does that?
So-
Like, I guess I need to be a little bit clear, clarification on that one.
Yeah, so I hear your point. I want to be clear that I'm not at all sure what we ought to end up with in the end. I think the intent is actually the opposite of what you're suggesting, Crystal.
Okay.
The reason it's written down is actually to say we're not going to criminalize the act of being homeless.
Okay.
But I think it
I'm
could be.
just reading it wrong then.
Well, no,
I'm
I think you're
thinking
reading it.
one way.
I think it's easy to read it the way you're reading it. And I'm saying I think it could be clearer because I don't think the intent is being spelled out correctly.
Right.
Yeah, we were
Okay.
maybe.
If what we mean is we're not trying to target people who are homeless to arrest them, we should just say that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I really think arrest needs to be out of there, totally. Arrest in the title and arrest later on. You said that this was an offense, or whatever you want to call it. This homelessness was only going to be given a citation if they were in the wrong place, whatever wrong means. Nobody said they were going to get arrested. Citation doesn't get you arrested. It says the ordinance does not make homelessness a criminal offense. Shouldn't be arrested for being homeless.
Yeah, to be fair, there is some gray area here. If someone is set up in the new Gardner Park playground and they're camping there, which is not outside the realm of possibility. I lived in Tucson and had a park a half a block from me where that kind of camping went on all the time in a public place with a lot of kids. If that happened and that person refused to leave repeatedly after being warned and given 72 hours notice or 28 or 20, whatever the rule is, right? There ought to be some way that we can enforce an ordinance at that point. So I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation. In fact, I think almost anyone in the room would argue that a parent taking their kids there has the right to feel like their kids are safe. And if you've got somebody who's refusing to leave, that's a problem. So I think there's an extreme end of it, and that I think this is trying to speak to. And the question is, can we can we use the language carefully enough so we're only referring to that extreme?
Well, I don't even know whether or not a municipality has the power to make a citation that would warrant an arrest, or that would allow an arrest. I think it's a question that needs to be answered.
That's what this is doing.
This is the power to cite people and give them a civil penalty. I don't know that this was ever intended to be to arrest people for anything other than what you can arrest people for, which is criminal offenses.
Understood. Understood.
I feel like that's what it's trying to line out, especially number 3. Criminal behavior already prohibited under state and local law.
Well, then you can always make an arrest for that purpose. You don't need a citation
I think
for that.
it's clarifying here that if should an arrest take place, it's not for being homeless, it's because there was a refusal to comply, an obstruction of public safety, or an existing.
And I don't know whether or not a municipality has the power to have people arrested for those kind of offenses when they're not in the criminal code. I'm just asking the question. I don't know the answer.
We can bring it up with Farzana.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think Travis would have something to say about this too. I mean, in fact, what he's trying to figure out is how to create something short of a criminal citation. That's right. I've had enough conversation with him about this to know that he's trying to actually avoid citing someone for a criminal offense. Okay, we're almost done, everybody. We're almost to the section that Crystal wants us to get to, which is section 7. So, section 6, the city will work in good faith with local outreach partners, housing providers, and public health agencies to offer information, referrals, and transportation where feasible, minimize trauma during relocation, and coordinate follow-up for those affected by removal. Anybody want to say anything about that?
Well, just one thing, we would need to know, the information, the shelter referrals, the transportation, you gotta have a list of what providers can help us, where can we go, what are they for, there's a list of say you got NEK-TV, then you got the economic services, you gotta detail what these businesses do or agencies do to help you.
Yep.
And what they're there for.
Yeah, that's part of the idea, of the direct outreach of us NECA going and saying, hey, we can help you. Let's set up a time, or why don't you come back and we can talk about these things. I think it would be advantageous with the posting. I think that they do this also in St. J. They provide a document of referral possibilities or other places that you can get help, I guess.
Yeah.
So that it's not just here's a posting and I don't know what to do with it. It's here's a posting and here's some options.
So I think it would have to be a little bit clearer.
Yeah.
For people
no,
to
I think
understand
that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, and I would say, one of the concerns I have about that is Casey actually helped me out a week ago with someone who really was desperate, needed a place to go, and I had already been told that my only option was to call 211, which immediately put me on hold, and I knew it was going to go nowhere for the rest of the afternoon, right? And I happened to have a direct access to Casey and was able to call and say, hey, can you help me with this guy? So whatever we say in that document needs to actually be real and realizable. Otherwise, it's not worth anything.
Right.
Eric?
So, Adam?
I brought this up 2 meetings ago. New York City, they call it the street sheet. And also if you team with Google and put in shelters, it'll pop up. But when you do it in different municipalities, for food pantry or shelters, they don't pop up. You have to tell Google, this operates between these hours on these days, and Google will be more than happy to add that to their Google Maps. In New York City, it's called the street sheet. You have the cops are the social workers, and they say, listen, this is what you go for, and then you figure it out.
I'm going to look into that. I've never heard of that.
Me neither.
It's just a street sheet. It's a cheat sheet of exactly what you just said.
Okay, last section. We're not going to worry about the 8, 9, and addendum. Section 7, civil penalties. Violations of this ordinance may result in civil penalties issued as a municipal civil complaint pursuant to whatever. Penalty shall be assessed. First violation, $50. Second violation, $100. Subsequent violations, $300. Maximum total penalty not to exceed $500. I can hear the wave coming on this one, and just to be clear, I agree entirely wave
It
is.
is stupid.
We're homeless, how are we gonna be able to pay this?
Right.
Like, we have no money. Or we get very little.
In addition, who is going to assess this penalty? Is it going to be a hearing before the council who is going to decide on these? And then what is the appeal process for it? Where does somebody who feels that it's been done unjustly to them get to say anything about it?
I would imagine the same place for like a traffic citation, are traffic citations here civil penalties as well?
I just attended the Vermont League training today, ordinance.
You did get to go. Good. Tell us, because I'm dying to hear.
One thing the instructor said, his name was Garrett. He said an ordinance without a penalty is just a suggestion. And the penalties are written, they're traffic tickets. They can go before a hearing officer, which is a part of the, if you've ever had a speeding ticket and contested it, there's a hearing officer, an impartial entity which looks at the ordinance and whether it's lawfully constructed, posted, whatever. So there is a recourse for a person.
Is that over in the court system?
It's online. They said since COVID, all of these have been
Online through the court
online.
system? I'm sure they're going to love to have all of these violations in the court system. They're moving along at a great pace.
The hearing officer, don't confuse the two. You have the judicial, the hearing officer, and then the criminal court system. Two different entities.
I think it might be helpful because this is definitely,
please,
the idea of how penalties are assessed is far above my understanding of the law. It'd be helpful to know how a civil violation is currently handled and how we could create a system around that using the same structure. I will also say, as I was reading this, it's kind of leaving me with like a chicken before the egg, because it says the city may waive or reduce penalties if the individual voluntarily complies within the notice period. So the way that my brain reads that is you're gonna get a ticket regardless of what happens. And then if you move within the 2 days, we'll forgive it. Just for me, there's a little bit of unclear there of like, or I'm going to give you the ticket. So I've asked you to move. I've given you the 72 hours. You didn't move. Then I came and I gave you a ticket for $50, let's say. You have X amount of time to pay the ticket, and in that time, if you move, then I will get rid of the ticket.
Right. I see your confusion.
It doesn't make sense to me of like how that process works.
And again, this was addressed. They said there's a maximum fine. In this case, let's say the
500.
Maximum fine is 500. These penalties, the first violation, the second, and third, are waiver violations, waiver fines, much like a inspection ticket. It's $150 if your car is not inspected. That's a waiver fine. If you contest it and you lose, the hearing officer could say, well, it's $1,000 fine, so the penalty is $1,000. These are just waiver fines. They said $24 of that goes to the state. So if you make it a $25 fine, the city is actually almost losing money because the officer's rating this.
If I'm living on the street, I don't have access to the internet, how am I going to negotiate all of this highly
Good question.
system?
When you're issued a traffic ticket, a ticket,
I see you, Crystal.
Yeah.
you're given a certain amount of days in which to respond.
The traffic ticket means I can drive.
Wait,
No.
I'm anxious to finish up, so let's not do this as a back and forth.
Okay.
Go ahead, Kevin. Go ahead.
When you're issued a ticket, I misspoke. I said traffic ticket. There's only one form. They use it for traffic tickets, for municipal violations, whatever. It goes through the judicial, traffic judicial court. It's separate than the hearing court. Anyways, they suggested there is no set standard for fines. They said, well, you make a waiver fine. Keep in mind that $24 goes right to the state for victims assistant law enforcement training. It's 24 or something. So they said, don't make it less than that. Don't make it the same amount as a violation, but have a gradual increase in penalties. And again, as it was pointed out, you've got this, but the next section says you're not going to get a ticket if you voluntarily comply, if you access the resources that are offered. There's no ticket. If a person's not going to be issued a ticket, then have it rescinded. In other words, here's the ticket, you better comply within 20 days. No, they said the ticket bureau doesn't like that because each one has to be tracked. So it may be you get a warning, you're still doing it tomorrow. Maybe you get a first offense ticket. Again, that the whole thing may be moot if you voluntarily comply, actively engage in the outreach, or if a ticket is just kicking the person while they're down, don't give it to them. And that would be the last one, where the penalty would cause undue hardship. Somebody's got no money.
It shouldn't be issued.
Crystal and Adam both wanted to speak. Crystal?
Just, so the whole penalty thing of like the violations, the part where it says that you can comply, if you comply with the outreach and the housing services, there again, you're gonna have to make that clearer on like where can you go to get the help to be able, so you don't have to keep getting a first violation, a second violation to a third, to whatever. You gotta make that clearer, I think.
Yep.
If I'm wording this right.
Yep. Adam?
I promise that if you start giving out fines, it's going to cost more than the person paying the fine. I promise to get back at whoever, people are going to fight it, have a date set up in court, the cop will have to go to court, and then they won't even show up to court. So all the resources, I promise, are going to be a lot more than $25. I pinky swear, even more than a promise. Of course.
What seems unfortunate to me is that we don't seem to have any way to move someone. We don't think we've got any option other than a fine. And I agree entirely with, so just to be clear, I don't think placing a fine against a person who clearly has no resources is useful in any way. Having said that, I think we need some options about what we do to enforce it when someone refuses to comply and to move out of a space where we really need them not to be. So I don't know what that looks like, but there's got to be a better way than this is going to cost you by the time you're done accelerating the process $500 that you'll never be able to pay.
Most of Newport residents know Newport police officers by their names. So just eye contact and respect.
Yep.
And the new people coming in, well, yo, you're not making this place hot for the rest of us.
All right.
Move.
Are there any final comments before I make a recommendation on how we move forward? I appreciate all the people who've been very quiet this afternoon as we've rehearsed a very important conversation. And I appreciate the folks who've come this afternoon, and you are always welcome. We're doing this every first and third Wednesday at 3:30 unless something unusual happens, we'll be here. So you are welcome to come and be a part of this conversation. And I appreciate the careful reading, and as usual, right? And so what I'd like to recommend is that at our next meeting, we set this aside and we focus on the other set of questions, which is what drives most of us to want to be around this table in the first place. And then we'll come back to the ordinance thing, probably the meeting after that, and talk further about it after we've had more chance to look at it. Does that sound all right? And I want to say, we asked Travis Gaines to do this as a volunteer, and he stepped forward and agreed to do it. And it's a kind of a thankless job. It's not an easy thing to sort. So I'm grateful for your work on this, and I do think we'll come to some reasonable accommodations about how to manage this process. Okay? Kevin, I apologize. I kind of stepped in and ran this.
Not at all.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in 2 weeks.